The experience I am about to share is a chapter of my life that I couldn't erase even if I wanted to. My name is Abir, and I work as a freelance wildlife photographer. Capturing nature is my addiction, and that very addiction led me to a secluded rest house deep within the dense forests of Bandarban. The place was so remote that getting a mobile network signal there was like finding a needle in a haystack. It was monsoon season, and the rain was pouring down in sheets over the mountains. The cottage I had booked was perched right at the very peak of a hill, an old-fashioned wooden bungalow surrounded by nothing but thick jungle and mist. The caretaker was a man named Salim, a strange, solemn character. When I arrived, dusk was already settling in. As he handed me the keys, he gave me a warning that sent a chill down my spine. He said, "Sir, the generator is low on fuel. The power will go out after 10. I've left some candles for you. And one more thing, if anyone calls your name at night or knocks on the door, do not open it under any circumstances. This jungle isn't safe. They live here." I laughed it off, thinking he was just a superstitious local. I bid him goodbye and stepped inside. The cottage was massive, but it had a damp, musty smell. The wooden floorboards creaked with every step I took. I set down my gear and freshened up. Outside, the rain had turned into a torrential downpour, drowning out every other sound in the world. Just as Salim had warned, the generator died exactly at 10 o'clock. The entire cottage was plunged into darkness. I lit 2 candles, and in their flickering light, the room looked even more mysterious. My own shadow on the wall looked like someone else standing there watching me. I walked over to the window. Outside it was pitch black, but occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the trees like giant monsters rising from the earth. Suddenly, I felt like someone was standing down below in the garden area. I squinted my eyes, peering into the dark. In a sudden flash of lightning, I saw it clearly. A figure wearing a raincoat, standing perfectly still in the pouring rain, staring right up at my window. My heart skipped a beat. Who would be standing out there in this storm at this hour? Salim had left for the village hours ago. I grabbed my flashlight and shined the beam out the window. But strangely, the moment the light hit the spot, it was empty. No one was there. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, a hallucination born from the exhaustion of the long journey. I closed the window and lay down on the bed, but a nagging feeling of unease settled deep in my gut. Sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned for hours. Suddenly, a sound started coming from the roof. It sounded like someone was running across the corrugated tin sheets. I tried to comfort myself by thinking it might be a monkey, but the sound wasn't erratic like an animal. It was heavy and rhythmic. Thud, thud, thud. It sounded like someone wearing heavy military boots was pacing from one end of the roof to the other. It was physically impossible for a human to walk on that slippery tin roof in this storm without falling. I sat up, my heart racing. Abruptly, the sound on the roof stopped. What I heard next made my blood run cold. Someone was gently scratching the door of my room with their fingernails. Scritch, scratch, scritch. If it were a rat or a cat, the sound would come from the bottom, but this was coming from the upper part of the door, at human height. I held my breath and stared at the door. Through the gap underneath the old wooden door, by the candlelight, I saw a shadow standing there. The shadow was not moving. I gathered every ounce of courage I had and asked, "Who is it? Who's there?" No answer came. The scratching stopped. Then, from the other side of the door, a voice whispered my name. It was low and raspy. "Abir. Hey, Abir. Open up, brother." I jumped in surprise. That was my friend Rashid's voice. Rashid was supposed to come with me, but he had fallen sick at the last minute, so I came alone. My first thought was that maybe Rashid had come to surprise me. Overwhelmed with relief, I got out of bed and walked toward the door. I was about to reach for the latch when Salim's warning struck my mind like a bolt of lightning. If anyone calls your name at night, do not open the door. I froze. If Rashid had come, he would have called me on the phone first. And how could he possibly get here in this storm in the middle of the night? I pressed my ear close to the door. The whispering came again. Abir, why aren't you opening up? I'm freezing. I'm soaked. The words were normal, but the tone was mechanical, unnatural. It sounded like a recording. I said, Rashid, if that's really you, call me on my phone right now. The moment I said that, a deathly silence fell on the other side. Then, suddenly, something kicked the door with tremendous force. Bam! The whole room shook. That familiar voice of Rashid instantly twisted into the growl of a predatory beast. A heavy, demonic voice spoke from the other side. You are very clever, but you won't last long. I stumbled back in terror and collapsed on the bed. I realized then that whatever was on the other side of that door was not human. It was a jinn, a demonic entity trying to trick me into letting it in. I started reciting the Ayat al-Kursi, the verse of protection, but I was so terrified that I couldn't even get the words out. For a while, everything went quiet. I thought maybe the danger had passed, but then a pungent smell hit my nose, the scent of rotting meat and sulfur. It was so strong I almost gagged. I noticed the temperature in the room had dropped drastically. It was freezing cold. The candle flickered and died, plunging me into total darkness. I fumbled around for my flashlight, but I couldn't find it, even though I had left it right beside my pillow. In the pitch black, I sensed something sitting on top of the wardrobe in the corner of the room. 2 red eyes were glowing in the dark, watching me. I couldn't move. It felt like sleep paralysis had taken over my body. The shadowy figure climbed down from the wardrobe. Its limbs were unnaturally long. It started crawling across the floor toward me. I could hear its bones cracking with every movement. It came right up to my bed. I closed my eyes and started calling out to God. I screamed in my mind, "Oh God, I seek your help. These are your creations, and you are stronger than them." The moment I started reciting the azan in my mind, Allahu Akbar, the shadow let out a shriek of pain and recoiled. It felt like invisible fire was burning it. It rushed toward the window and smashed through the glass, disappearing into the storm. The sound of shattering glass filled the room as rain and wind started blowing in. I knew the night wasn't over yet. Freezing wind was rushing in through the broken window. I sat, huddled in the corner, trembling. Suddenly, my phone rang. There was no network, yet the phone was ringing. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. My hands were shaking as I answered. Salim's voice came through from the other end. "Sir, are you okay? I can see from down here that your window is broken. I'm coming up." I let out a sigh of relief. Thank God Salim was coming. I said, "Uncle, please hurry. There is something very evil in here." Salim replied, "I'm already standing outside your door. Just open it." I was about to get up when it hit me. Salim told me he lived in the village down below. It would take at least an hour to climb up the hill in the storm. How could he be at my door the second he called? I looked at the phone. The call had disconnected. But from the other side of the door, someone spoke in Salim's exact voice. "Why aren't you opening the door, sir? I forgot to bring my keys." Now I was certain this was another trap. That wasn't Salim. That demon was mimicking different people's voices to deceive me. I screamed, "Get away from here! I have taken the name of God! You cannot harm me!" From the other side, a loud, manic laughter erupted. It sounded like 100 people laughing at once. It was blood-curdling. The door started shaking violently, rattling on its hinges as if it were about to be ripped off. I knew if my faith wavered for even a second, I was done for. I started reciting Surah Fatiha and the verses of protection at the top of my lungs. The battle continued until just before dawn. Sometimes it felt like the roof was collapsing. Sometimes it felt like hands were grabbing my ankles from under the bed. But I stayed on my prayer mat, never stopping my prayers for a single moment. Finally, the first light of dawn began to break. From a distant mosque in the valley, the sound of the Fajr azan drifted through the air. As-salatu khairum minan naum. Prayer is better than sleep. As the sound of the azan reached my ears, the heavy atmosphere inside the cottage began to lift. The smell of rot faded away. The banging on the door stopped. I knew the night was over. The evil forces had retreated in the face of the morning light. I opened the door and stepped out. There were no footprints on the veranda, but there were deep, gouged claw marks all over the door. I didn't waste a single second. I packed my bag and left. As I was driving down the hill, I met the real Salim coming up. Seeing my pale, terrified face, he simply asked, "Sir, did something happen last night?" I just looked at him and said, "Uncle, you were right. That is not a place for humans." I returned to the city that day, but the terror of that night haunted me for a long time. I suffered from a high fever for 7 days. The doctors said it was shock, but I know it wasn't just fear. I later found out that the bungalow originally belonged to a cruel indigo planter who tortured locals there. After his death, the place became cursed. The locals believe a tribe of jinn lives there, and they do not tolerate human trespassers. To those listening to my story, I have only one thing to say. We often venture into unknown places for adventure without knowing the history or the unseen forces that reside there. Remember, purity, prayer, and faith in the Almighty are the only armor that can protect you. And if you ever hear a loved one calling your name when the situation doesn't feel right, be careful. What you see and what you hear isn't always the truth. Stay safe on unknown paths. Good night.